Okay, good morning, everyone, and happy Friday, October 16th. We are live again with Marilyn Poppelmeyer. Today, we will be talking with Amy Pryor, artist who graduated from Ohio University in 1996.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday, October 16th.
I gotta shut that off. Sorry about that. I just heard myself going live on the other screen. So I am going to introduce Amy Pryor. We are waiting to hear from Pocket Toscani, and hopefully she will be joining us as well. We're switching up the lineup and in hopes that we will get to hear from both artists today. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Amy. Amy Pryor is a Bronx-based artist who utilizes a variety of media to create collages, paintings, sculptures, and installations. She often incorporates data, maps, and imagery from aerial and astral photographs into her work that explore the intersections of commerce, culture, and landscape. Pryor's work has been featured at numerous cultural institutions, including the Bronx Museum of Art, Bronx River Arts Center, Casita Maria Center for the Arts and Education, Franz Massariel Centrum, the Islip Museum, New Haven Museum, 92Y Tribeca, No Longer Empty, and Wave Hill. We are very excited to have Amy here. I'm going to bring her into the conversation. Thank you, Amy, for coming.
Thank you for hosting this, setting this all up, Courtney.
No problem. Without further ado, I'm going to let you two have a nice conversation, and I will be in the wings waiting. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
Good morning. It's been a long time.
I know it has been a long time. We've got sun. We've got rain today, so I've got my artificial light here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's been 20-some years, decade.
When I was thinking back, I remembered the Marlight competition. Do you remember the Marlight competition?
I do remember the Marlight competition. I've not thought of that in some time, except that sort of basic, that sort of primary structure. I still like those. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the piece that just to fill in the Marlight Corporation ran a competition with students to come up with designs using their material. It was a very difficult material because basically it's kind of a masonite back with a plastic covering, and it's very resistant to glues and paints and anything.
It's like a display board, like with grooves pre-cut into it to like hang shelving or something. I think. I remember there were slots in it because I used those. But go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a house building material. And anyway, Amy won first place and in the competition, and we went to the corporation, and there was a little, I don't know if there was we drove over to Dover, Ohio for the reward. Was there a ceremony? I don't remember that part.
I don't really remember. I think I got a check.
Yeah, I know you got money.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's rather vague, but I do remember, I still like stacking things. So that's basically how I ended up using that material. I think I stacked it and made towers, and it had slots in the side. And then I cut a poplar really thin that I used to connect these different towers to make this kind of grid.
Ah, good.
So,
I'm glad you remember
I remember the work more than the.
Okay, that's the important part. It's coming back to me.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks for jogging my memory. I forgot that we actually went there for.
I know. Yeah, and it's kind of a long drive. It was like a whole day thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, haven't been back to Dover since.
No. No.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to kind of catch up with your work because I haven't I haven't followed it, and I'm a little remiss there, but it'll be fun to do it this morning.
Yeah. So, well, after I left OU, I think when I left, I was working pretty heavily in collage, but kind of sculptural, big, large scale installation paper pieces. And basically the collage hook has been a thread throughout my work. And I think that, it basically was like a way of using a material. I think a lot about it as, as we have the conversation about sculpture versus painting. I mean, I very much see myself as an artist who uses materials, and I think my sculptural training gave me a sense of materials and materiality that is key to the work. So I switch between mediums, but always with a sense of like, what is this material and what does this material say? What's its, use in, does it have another use factor, like if you're using something like lined paper or whatever, like, and what does that mean? And so I think collage I've been drawn to that because it brings in the history of that material that you're using. It's not like a blank canvas, which has its own history, but everybody doesn't have a relationship with a blank canvas, whereas everybody has a relationship with a cereal box, probably. So see, then I was out of school for a while, and I was actually farming in Virginia, which I hadn't realized you had grown up on a farm. So I'd always liked gardening and working outside and with nature. So I did that for a while, and then I applied to graduate schools, and I got into Yale for painting and printmaking. And I basically spent my entire time there never actually painting and sort of struggling with, well, what is painting? And now I don't think about that question. I think it's not a very interesting question, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this too. It's like you make an object, and I think in one of your earlier talks, Marilyn, you were saying that, you can make it, you experience an object, whether it's two-dimensional, differently if it's flat on a table or on the wall, and just seeing something on the wall is very different than approaching something from around it in space. And the way that we read that and relate to that object changes. And I think that what we get from putting something on the wall is we get a little gift of, or this extra story of reading it as a pictorial space, just because we've been trained to look at pictures on walls, I think.
And a little bit of illusion, I think.
Right.
Once something moves off the floor and onto a wall and there's space around it, it seems, I mean, I guess that's what you mean by pictorial, that we start to think about the depth of it in a different way and seeing into it in a different way than we do if something is a piece of sculpture in a space or in a room that we feel like we can experience that fully. There's not much illusion involved with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I don't know if you can, I'm not exactly sure where it is, Courtney, on my website, but my sort of thesis project at Yale, I was saving all of my consumer packaging. So I think it's probably in the archive, but it could be in installations. And so I had all of my packaging from everything I purchased from an entire year saved and making, figuring out what to do with that. So there were objects in the room, and then there were mostly the plastic material on the wall. And, you know, something just, there's a way in which putting something on the wall when it's an object that we use, it's like a freebie, like it transforms it a little bit, right? You start to see it as something else. Maybe it's not in there. But anyhow, a lot of my work, you know, I was using these things that are taken from consumer packaging or ad prints. So there are barcodes, there are advertisement. These starbursts that you're seeing, those are, you know, on packages to advertise something. And so I started using those to map constellations. This one is security envelopes. I'm not really seeing the.
Yeah, I get the idea of it. I think because I read, well, I have a small image here. Is this the one you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, this is just sort of like, I feel like this is the sort of transition from, right? Like this sort of aha moment of what an object in the room does versus an object on the wall. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's kind of a way that you don't, you know, maybe I'm sort of seeking, you know, I want to talk about this stuff, and I want to talk about, you know, different ideas about how we relate to the world and how man has shaped, right, the landscape. But you can't escape that object in the room, right? Those are water bottles. Maybe you could transform that totally for a moment. But I think that when I found for myself, for what I was interested in, that putting it then on the wall, it became, right? It was able to open up another conversation.
Yeah, there seems to be a kind of infinity or suggestion of infinity or continuum as it moves up on the wall, or when it becomes more of an image and less of an object.
Yeah. And so that sort of sense of expansiveness and that kind of breaking down of things, I've also had an interest in too. Courtney, if you scroll back up to this piece that I'll tell you when to stop. It's down from there. It's has a lot of barcodes. It's a large. This one. So this one is hard to see what's going on without a detail, but this is a timeline, and so it makes this sort of abstract landscape. It's a graph. It's based on a bar graph. So I charted the U.S. GDP. So starting on the left, that's the percentage of U.S. GDP. I don't remember offhand what this scale is, but and then I used barcodes. So if you can go to a detail, just scroll up a little. So there's barcodes that were saved from packaging that form this sort of the land, right? And then there's this kind of rain that is text. And so along this timeline, it's like current events from political events, world events, cultural events. And then there's also color coding in this work. So there's this shift from, you can see the shift from the red barcodes to the blue barcodes. That represents the political affiliation of the presidential party. So from Republican to Democrat. That makes sense. And I think this is we're seeing George W. Bush era and Obama's first years on the right there, where it turns to blue.
Is it like a 5-year?
I believe it was 25 or 30 years.
Oh, okay.
30 years, because it was commissioned for the Bronx Museum to commemorate the 30th anniversary of their AIM program. So I did it with the 30. It was like current to that year back in time, beginning with, I think, Carter. So I have this, interest in data and information and, these bigger projects that are kind of, they're not totally predetermined, but they have a structure, right? Whether it's a graph or something. And then another practice that's basically, more experimental and, constantly exploring different materials and doing side things. And partly it's like if I do a project like this that's very labor intensive, like I'm keeping my interest or finding some balance in what I'm doing by doing something else. I think that's why I do it. Let's see.
Can you talk about the process some? So do you keep would you keep like a large collage going and add to it as you could and then work on other things?
Yes. And some of it's driven by deadlines, am I trying to finish something for something? But basically, in my studio, I have a large collage that's an aerial view with product boxes. I know I've completed several of those kinds of projects that are basically, the first one I did was from an aerial photograph taken during World War I that was mapping, the aerial photograph. That technology was basically used, not surprisingly, for surveillance and tracking the movement of trenches. And I had some other, I found these aerial photographs just fascinating just because of how it kind of abstracts the landscape and gives us a view. Flying in an airplane has always been a great experience for me in that regard. So the first one I made was called Levant. And so I have a large aerial view that's based on, I have this atlas of landforms that was like U.S. Geological Survey, and it has all these like stereoscopic photographs of lands. And so that's been a big reference point. And then of course now we have Google Earth. So I have that, and that piece, it just keeps kind of growing. That one's about 10 feet. So that's on one wall of my studio. And then I have a painting practice. And during the quarantine, I really painted more than I have in any other time in my life. And I think that I found it, I was making these gridded paintings. So the one that's in the show is, I'm seeing the sky stripes for this. I don't think that's on this website, Courtney. I haven't put it on here yet. So the process, I'm talking about it in a pretty scattered way, and sometimes it is, it's like I've got a sculpture project in my yard that I started during the last hurricane when we had a power outage, called Boneyard, that I'm making with downed limbs. So that's an ongoing project, and then I coat that with lime wash, so it's kind of these bone structural things, and that's kind of part of the garden landscape. And so that's an ongoing project. I've been doing a lot of sewn projects, handicraft kind of things too, where I'm trying to use the single-use plastic. I've been kind of locker hooking, it's called. It's a way of kind of, it looks like this. This is a little test, right? So I've got a big piece so this is an example of like, I need to accumulate a certain amount of material to even be able to finish a project. And now, fortunately, single-use plastic bags have been banned in the city. So I'm getting them from other, from things in the mail or other kinds of packaging, and using that for projects. So that project's going on. I keep a sketchbook. I keep small studies. Yeah, it's a lot. Sometimes it feels like very unfocused, and then sometimes I think like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And like the fabric, I've gotten really into working with fabric, and I think it's because it has this kind of comfort, right? It has this like meaning that feels comforting, and especially in a time where we're isolated. And I grew up in southeastern Ohio without really exposure to art. I think probably the first visual object that I loved was a quilt, and I think I probably played on that as a child. So I think there's something, right, like that, there's probably a reason why certain materials draw me at certain times. And
it's really interesting how many parallels our work has over the years that we didn't know about. But so do you feel like the use of the plastics and the kind of just the dedication to recycling is something that is important maybe politically, whereas the fabrics have more of a kind of tradition or a history to them?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's all political, right? It's like the tradition, right? I mean, the tradition of quilt making. I've gotten all these books recently, and if you get a book from, I don't know, the American Quilt Society, they're like, quilting is an American tradition. And then I have another book about African American quilts. It's like, no, actually, all of these designs came from African textiles. So it is political as much as it is maybe a traditional kind of handicraft, thought of as crafts by women in the history that quilting had in America. Yeah, and I do, the single-use plastics, it's like I really can't throw them in the garbage. So it's, a bag of frozen peas. It's like I have to figure out what to do with this material. In a way. So yeah, in a way it is all political. It's like how we use materials and how materials function in our life.
Yeah, plastic just seems to be, and no one's going to really give it up now that we have it, because it does so many things that nothing else will do. And yet there is this, like, if you let it go and it can't be recycled, then you're part of the problem. So like being able to kind of continue that usage in some way, I think is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important. I mean, the issue of plastics, like finding something to do with it, how to recycle it. The recycling is inefficient and ineffective. It doesn't, New York City, picks it up, but does it actually get recycled? It's a big, controversy.
Right.
So,
yeah,
I think we have to treat it as something that's precious, that's a resource and not just garbage.
So when you're looking at these yourself, do you think of kind of history of usage? Do you see that when you look back at the work? Where to us, we maybe don't see, we're not able to identify like particular items or materials in it from a distance. I mean, we may have used some of the same things, but I was just thinking that for you, there's like the sourcing of those. And I guess I was also thinking about the parallel with kind of traditional crafts like quilting, where they became a kind of family history, or they became a history just because there was a saving of the material, and then it came from people's clothing and leftover scrap, and then was reused, and always carried that kind of history of where it came from.
Yeah, and I think, as I've, hadn't thought so directly about quilting, but I actually think that it's probably, one of the formative things in terms of my approach to making work, right? It's like you're saving this thing, you're repurposing this thing, right? You're making something useful out of it. The whole collage aesthetic, right? The piecing something together, I feel like relates to quilting. Yeah, I think that it probably is a huge influence that it goes back beyond, before I started thinking about art.
I keep thinking about this quilt that I've told a lot of students about this, but maybe not you, I'm not sure. But it was in maybe the Capitol, it was someplace close to our museum space in Frankfort, Kentucky. And it was an old quilt that was made by a woman. And she had, it was basically a cemetery. It had like fence in the middle of it. And then she had made a little coffin for each family member. And then it had embroidered everyone's name. Mm-hmm. And everyone that was alive was around the border, but everyone that was already gone was in the middle. And then when someone died, she would take the coffin off with their name and move it into the interior. And it's like not an idea that we do anymore, just in terms of dealing with death. But I don't know, it just is an interesting it's such a heavy involvement in just the quilt making and how it is a kind of history or a keeping of things and an archiving that there's usually someone in the family that is saddled with that in one way or another. They take it on, or it becomes part of what they do historically, which is, in a way, the artist studio, I guess, kind of becomes that there are all these kind of continuing projects. And I've been moving a lot of things and trying to divest of some. And I have found many old beginnings to pieces that kind of had just one last step to them. And I can't give them up, even though they're of a time period when I don't know if I can go back to that thinking and work them, but they become part of studio history, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the archive of our lives and our practice. I am curious about, because you said you shifted to handicrafts, and I'm thinking about, like, why am I so into this? And part of it thinks that it has to do with motherhood. As my children are, teenagers, late teens, my son will go to college next year. That it has something to do with, like, comforts of home, keeping it together, I don't know. But it has been, I found a lot of pleasure in doing those kinds of things. Not earlier in my life. I wasn't that interested.
I think
when it became.
Go ahead.
Yeah, when it became, because you mentioned that you were doing handicrafts pretty intensely. And I remember when I was in school, you were doing a lot of sewn sculptures.
I think there's a meditative nature to it. There's a lot of repetition. There's also and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but just the idea that you're making something that has an end result that you can, you may have you might know exactly what it's going to look like, or there's it's a kind of relief from art making in a way, because there's a kind of never zone to making a piece and not knowing where it's going or what it's going to be. But a traditional craft like knitting, I don't know. To me, it always there was a pleasure in making a scarf or making a pair of gloves or something like that. And I often thought, well, maybe I can actually knit something that will become a piece of sculpture or something. And I know many people have done that, but I never found that it translated directly that way. But there are some parallels just in the kind of rhythm of it and the shifting of it and how a mistake will alter the whole trajectory of the thing. And I think the portability of it also is something that, and the way it fits into a time schedule is a little bit different than being in a studio with a large piece and having to be fully there and fully committed to it for a long period of time.
Yeah, I'm thinking, when do I do this? It's like in the evening when I'm kind of tired and I've, done everything else all day, and I can sit down with my dog and, do this thing that's pleasurable. And partly, I like to, like you said, it does have I can't say that I know the end result, because some of these things are I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them, like the knitted plastic, for instance. I haven't quite figured that out, but it is different than sort of holding that space of making a painting or sculpture where you don't know how it's going to resolve, right? I mean, that can become a challenge, or like you said, like you have things that just get put away and never completed because those solutions aren't there necessarily.
This is a little bit on a different subject, but one of the things I noticed looking at your work is that there's a kind of sense of, I mean, you mentioned aerial view, but also just of landscape. I guess aerial view of land against water, but also kind of landscape space with open sky or something behind, so that you get this kind of feeling of all of these things replacing what might have been earth, or what might have been mountains, or what might have been buildings.
Yeah. I mean, I think my interest in landscape has been, I didn't approach it from a traditional, landscape kind of painter, but that's definitely in the work. And so I've done things that are more diagrammatic, like I've used cross section, like a geological cross section of a volcano. I made a collage with that. I've done things that, have things like this one on the screen where it's like a sky, functions like a sky. Or if you roll up, we can look at something else. There's sky here in this one, right? There's day sky and night sky. There's land, right? Albeit, abstracted. And so that sense of the artifice of landscape and how we've impacted landscape or replaced, fake mountains of trash or whatnot. And so sometimes they're more like abstract, like this constellations. So there's a sense of I'll do work where you're looking up at the sky, you're looking down at the ground, you're like somewhere in the middle of it, in a way trying to sort out my position or our position in a very complex world. I think there's a kind of, right, like looking, where's the map?
How do I locate myself? I was, while I'm looking at these, I'm wondering about that, because many of them seems like they're views from some distance. And you talked a little bit about the space where you live and work. Are you in the city, or are you outside a little bit, or does that have any influence on experience space and what you make?
Yeah, so I do live in the Bronx, but we're in a neighborhood where we actually have a yard, so it's not super dense where we're at. I've definitely lived in, large apartment buildings in Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn. I had a studio in Yonkers in an old warehouse. And there was a fire there, so I moved back into home, started working at home after that. But yeah, I think it does influence. And since having a yard and a garden, I've been doing a lot more gardening. And so I think, I don't sit in the garden and like paint a picture of what's there, but I do think it filters into what I'm making, somehow how we're experiencing the landscape, all that pleasure, I think it filters, it trickles up into the work somehow, whether it's super direct or kind of just in there. But
I think one of the differences of living in a kind of denser city compared to in a more rural area like this one in Ohio is that and you're close to the water, so there's this high contrast between being in the density and then going to a place where you can see the open ocean or on out into the landscape. So I think you have this awareness of that kind of things very, very tight together versus open space. That's a little bit different here, where we tend to experience space in a kind of continuum. We don't have those sorts of drastic changes in the same way.
Oh yeah, no, I think especially if we think about my relationship to the sky, right? I mean, that's one of the, right? It's like if you go out of the city, it's like, wow, I can see the entire sky. Like, if I lay down, all I see is sky. Whereas, if I'm looking, out a window, we're in the city, right? It's a sliver of sky between buildings or, trees or something. So you never get that sense of the whole sky living in the city.
I also think
certainly not constellations, right? Like they're just too much light pollution.
Yeah. And sky is kind of incomprehensible too, because it changes, the light changes, it depends on where you are, and it's not touchable in the same way that ground is. It has a kind of infinity. I find even like photographs from space to be incomprehensible.
Yeah, no, there is a real kind of abstraction. It's like, how do you wrap your head around that? And that sort of fleeting quality is, I think it's drawn artists to that subject over and over again, right? And
Yes.
and man too, right? I mean, who doesn't like a beautiful open sky, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So these starburst images are interesting because they're like those kind of reward stickers, or the kind of labeling that's usually very intense and tries to get your attention when they're like bright orange or have a price on them. And here they start to look like it's something opening up. Like
yeah,
this one maybe see through.
Yeah, and this one in particular, it does seem to be functioning more like a void, right? An open space. I mean, part of that's a function of the color, the dark and the blue receding against that white, and the graphic, the prices there. But yeah, they definitely come from that packaging. And I've noticed, I've been collecting them since I think 1999, the Starburst, and it's interesting because I did a project that I ended up researching a lot of like the history of graphic design and print, and that's what some of these numbers are, these prices are, as a side project of that one. And the Starbursts are pretty, they date back to like I found one from like 1910, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then they've sort of faded in the more recent packaging. You don't see them as much. They've been replaced by just a circle. I've noticed. It's like, they're not around, because that used to be they'd be on every, like a potato chip bag, right? At 0 grams, no trans fats or something.
I wonder if that's a function of sort of economizing in some way. That these are a little more complex to manufacture. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I feel like it's also, it's like something about the marketing, what are you trying to appeal to? Because I'll find them in like a mail order catalog that has a lot of products like for those middle aging and aging Americans, right? Like supports and braces and, some cozy slippers. There's a lot of them in there.
Right.
But then if you put like whatever, something that's, wants to appear classier, they're not in there.
Right. Yeah.
So there's some kind of like mass pop culture aspect to them.
Do you use mail order catalogs? I mean, they're hard to get now, right?
I get a lot of gardening catalogs, so I do have a bunch of flowers awaiting a collage one day. But yeah, no, it's definitely shifted. I've done a lot of work with mail. There was an earlier one where the postmark, the postmark and the cancellations used to be right around timestamp date and time, and a sort of wavy line to cancel that stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And that's shifted since I've been use those to a digitized version of the wavy lines and no circular stamp. You rarely see that. I think probably small town post offices may still use them, but yeah.
Oh, this is a show.
Yeah, so this is a show that was at Casita Maria Center for the Arts, and the sort of the black wall back there is a burst. Yeah,
Is that painted directly on the wall?
Yes, this is a different show. This is a collage on the wall.
Okay.
But yeah, so Courtney, if you go back up to that show, yeah, so that's a paint, painted the background, the black and the blue rays, and then scanned those found starburst ads and printed them as stickers and then stuck them on the wall.
And does the black continue on to something that looks like a door, or that's just an illusion?
Yeah, no, I had them paint the door black just to make that space, work a little better. And then on the left, the long sort of rectangular is an aerial view. So that's like made on 3 panels. And it looks like an aerial photograph made with collaged pasteboard boxes, cereal boxes, and kind of thing. And then the sculptural, the kind of rocks are made from cardboard and packaging.
It's interesting to see it all together in the space.
And I do, like your question about process, it's like I don't want to necessarily I like seeing my work kind of in conversation with itself, like one of these, or a sampler, right? One of these and one of those and one of those. And partly because I think it like sort of, it presents a different challenge to the viewer, to myself, even just like, well, when you see this with this and how that changes the meaning or opens up the different possibilities for how materials are used.
I think one of the things that can happen with like really skillful collaging too is that a part just becomes part of this whole, and the kind of whole space it's creating illusionistically, where, you know, you move back to something that's like solid, like the rock, and it's a reminder in a way of what the source of the material is, and it also is like this kind of discussion of you know, a real stone or boulder or piece of land that's actually is made from these materials, cereal boxes or whatever. There's a tangibility to that you lose a little bit when you get to a wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the piece that was on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, when it comes to sculptural objects, I think I've always struggled making things because I do love, like, you know, I make things that end up with like these forms that are rocks that are kind of stacked, or something that in a way has a more kind of natural sense, because I just love, you know, you know, like nature is a great sculptor, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of hard to top that sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Just the accumulation. The leaves are coming down now, and I don't know. It's always a surprise how dramatic that is, and how the color varies and how it moves, and you know, and I can see that in the work, this kind of movement and expansion and contraction, even though they also look like city maps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this idea of this aerial view is kind of what I'm working on in the quilting too. It's a little more, it's changed a little bit because of how a quilt is structured, right? You have to kind of sew it together in blocks or strips or sections. So it doesn't move, you know, this one I see as a rural kind of, right, you know, farmland and that kind of thing. So this, I feel like what I'm making now is a little more, it's more rigid, more gridded, more structured in that way. At least that's the first, you know, my first one. It's like that.
I think if you use a machine, it certainly kind of moves you a little more toward the grid.
Right. And partly it's because I'm like teaching myself how to do this, you know, so I'm getting like traditional quilting. It's like, oh, it's all made with blocks. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to basically, you know, work in squares and rectangles and then put those together. You know, it's part of how, you know, how do I learn how to do it in a more basic way? So.
Do you think those will be shown then on the wall like these are?
I think so. You know, I'm not sure if they're going to actually be quilted. You know, I started to stretch one of them up, so it's more like a sewn painting. I think I'll probably try all of the possibilities and see, you know, because they're all going to read very differently, you know. And then I've got one that's just really weird where I'm kind of making with scraps. And by the way, the whole quilting kind of came in because of COVID and masks. Like I was sewing masks. I got out the sewing machine, which I hadn't used since high school home ec, to make masks. So it was sort of a necessity. And so I have these weird kind of curvy pieces from the masks that I think this is an object. This is something that's going to be stuffed because it has these weird, not really crystalline, but it's a more complicated structure. It's not flat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
So Courtney, are we going to keep going, or are we at an ending? I'm sure we can keep going, but
I actually just heard from Pocket. So she says I'm here. I had internet problems. So she's not here.
Yeah.
So we can, I'm just gonna try and get her on the line and make sure that she has the right link. And then we'll have Pocket Toscani on also. It's been really wonderful. You guys can keep on talking if you wish for a few more seconds, if you don't mind, or it's been a wonderful talk. I've been really enjoying hearing about your practice and your work, Amy. One thing that I found kind of interesting, and this is maybe a little in line with some of the research and maybe some essays that I've been reading recently, but talking about pleasure. And that's a word that I think it's interesting to talk about getting pleasure out of making. And I mean, like, but that I think that there is a certain critical aspect to identifying that, claiming that and as academics and as, artists and professionals, it's sort of like pleasure is not considered like this valid stance to identify with. It's sort of like this, it's something else. We shouldn't talk about that. But I think that you guys were sort of talking about that, and it struck this chord of like, I don't know, I'm gonna make a mark of that and kind of maybe try to tease that out a little bit more in some of the other things that I'm engaged in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it's a good point, and I think that I'm now at a point in my practice where I can acknowledge that and engage that, allow that. And I do think that the sort of shift, like into the oil paintings, the ones that are in the show and the other oil paintings that I've been making, that really had something, like I really allowed myself to do that because I'm like locked down. It's like, oh my gosh, people around me are dying, friends have died of this, and this could be it. Do I want to, no, do something you want to do right now. This could be your last chance. It also helped that I've discovered you can use lavender oil. So it smells very nice and it's very calming.
For what? Lavender oil
with the paint. Yeah, that's lovely.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah.
Spike lavender.
I hope some.
There's no Damar varnish. It's just, there's no linseed oil. It's lavender oil.
I love that.
Yeah. So it was soothing, and the grid, the structure, all that is very kind of reassuring.
Does it last on the surface? Like, if once it kind of like dries or cures, oil's oil, so it kind of like.
Yeah, the oil paint, I'm buying oil paints that already have some carrier oil in there, linseed, I think, for the most part. So yeah, they polymerize just like regular, that's just the solvent to make, to thin it a little. And it actually was used, I think, traditionally, like in the Renaissance painters, like that's what they use, like a lavender oil of spike lavender.
Like lavender. I think that also ties in to what Joy Curtis said in a previous talk with Marilyn. The idea of, what was her exact quote was, as artists, we can make what we want to see in the world. And like that kind of, and, I think COVID also has had a little bit of bearing on that, where you start to kind of identify those things that do give you pleasure, and that whether that's a material that you're working with or a smell or a sight or an activity, but then it all kind of comes together as like the essential aspects of like life that we want to, participate in becomes much more important.
Yeah, it is. I think she said something like, that's the control, that's our control, right? We can control what we make and what we want to see.
Yeah.
And nothing.
And that is hugely important, I think that it is to be able to have that and to create that is and we're talking about pleasure, and Marilyn also touched on politics. I think that it is also political, and I think that it can be both. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. I'm gonna mute myself for just a second so I can maybe try to get Amy. She says she's here, but I'm wondering if she's watching online and not on the link. So I'm gonna scoot out for just a minute.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's been so great to reconnect, Marilyn. I hope we
Yeah,
can have more conversations and maybe in person. You know, I still have
that would
family.
be great when we can do in person. That would be something. Yeah, I thought in going through this, what it could have been like, or might have been like, if we'd all been able to kind of be together. But I don't know. There's something about the structure of this that enables maybe a little more time to actually have a conversation where something that's a little more social and or a social event, there's only little pockets of time for
Right. And you're in an arena.
right. Yeah. So getting to see everyone's work and reconnect with that, I think, is a really good thing, because you get a lot of depth of knowledge and connection in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I reflect back on sort of, my life, my trajectory, and you don't know where you're going to end up.
Wow.
But I am really grateful for my education at OU and your tutelage and the sort of experience of materials and sculpture and like thinking about what that means to make an object. That's been with me my entire career. So
yeah, that's great to hear that. Yeah, it's one of the things that's been really gratifying about doing this, is that people will mention maybe just a little experience or an assignment or this or that they were able to take with them. So I think it's good to hear as a teacher, because sometimes you're doing a lot of work, you're hoping it helps people, but you don't always know, does this have an effect or does it not have an effect? And sometimes it's really surprising to hear when someone will remember something that you didn't remember, or it isn't anything that you thought was significant. So you kind of just have to keep going and putting out like work and teaching and whatever it is you do. And people kind of catch it as they go through their life or as they go by, but you never fully know how big that's going to be.
Yeah.
If at all.
Good.
I was thinking about that idea, since we have a minute here, the idea of, I guess Courtney identified the actual word pleasure. And I have this game I play with myself when I have work I don't want to do, or if I think that I'm maybe having too much pleasure, I'm, and so I'll like start out and I'll give myself 10 minutes to work and then 10 minutes to have a break, and then it sometimes it's work and sometimes it's a break, and then the break becomes maybe going outdoors, and that might be called work as well. And I notice when I'm like working on a piece that I started to get confused about, okay, I'll take a break from maybe something I have to do on the computer and I'll work on my work. And then I started to get confused when I was writing down my times, because the concept of work wasn't that definable. I was taking breaks from the thing I didn't want to do in order to work on this big canvas I'm working on. And that was actually my break or my pleasure from some of this other stuff I had to do. So it's really interesting how that kind of works in your mind. Somebody said to me, I think it's a quote from an artist, but I don't know who it's from, but it's this idea of not working is working.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think as artists, we're kind of always working, even when we're resting. But I think it's a Zen quote, or this idea of like resting, the idea of resting by changing activities.
Yeah. Yes.
And I feel like that's a huge, that kind of explains my practice and why I have different things going on. It's like sometimes it's the going outside, which is, necessary for sunlight. And, I find pleasure in gardening. It's still work, right? But it doesn't feel. So there's a way that it, I think I set up games too. And a lot of times it's like, it's a puzzle, right? They're visual puzzles we're constantly solving. So
I'm often, I don't have much interest anymore in doing work that I have much control over. So setting up some kind of system or practice in the beginning that has always an element of not knowing where it's going. And the parallel with gardening, I think, is interesting because you do something and then you can go away and come back in a week or a few weeks, and something has changed. And I always feel a little bit of that with making, that if I work one day, I spend a lot of time, then there's this real pleasure to go back and see what did that become. When
you're making it, I sometimes feel like you don't. I sometimes feel like I don't really see the work, or you don't see it in the same way when you're making it as when you see it, right, in another context on a show or online. Like, it's very different.
Yes. I was wondering,
making it, you don't really see it.
Yeah.
You don't have that, like, you haven't been able to like pull back.
Right. And just get an overview. What do you think about like how much we're experiencing work now through it's always mediated very much, like we're looking at images, or it's a photograph of it.
I think the more things become digital and mediated, the more tactile I want the work to be.
Yes, because you miss it. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I remember having that sort of a discussion about, like, right, like even a painting, right, which is a two-dimensional object, maybe more or less flat on canvas, has a very different, right? It's very different seeing that in person because it still has tactility, it still has its object, it still has its paint, the quality of the paint and the surface it's on. So it's a very different way of seeing things.
I think it also distorts scale. Okay, we can stop.
Oh, hi. We have Pocket. I think we are. Thank you so much for your patience. And I mean, it's so hard to end at these things because there's always sort of like little nuggets that then keep the conversation rolling. And I mean, we've been broadcasting for over an hour now, which is amazing. And I could go on forever. I mean, it's so fun to hear both of you guys speaking, and I've been really enjoying it. And we've negotiated we have Pocket, who's right around the corner, and I will bring her into the conversation here if that is okay. Amy, have you met Pocket before?
We have not met.
Okay, I will bring you in.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, good to see you. Yeah, I didn't remember if you had any overlap with Amy or not, but
No,
No, probably like 10 years before her time or something.
yeah, different time.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense because you graduated in 86 and undergrad and grad. And so then grad school was 88.
Yes.
Right?
So I always tell people I'm like inbred. All I know about sculpture is what Marilyn Poppelmeyer told me.
That is funny.
No. Anyway, but it was a lot. It was a lot. So
Yeah, I know I wasn't the only one there too.
Dave was Dave was influential too. So
Right. Yes, because this was the time of David Klon. But
Yes.
he remembers David Klon as well. I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I heard
First
stories.
class I took was David's class. Yeah.
Yeah. He was amazing. I mean, he was like, what he said was like, I mean, there was no messing around. You know, it seemed like, Marilyn, you were more open to interpretation, a little, I guess just a little more open, you know, about what your interpretation was.
Yeah, I think by comparison, I'm a more fluid person, although I don't know that I would describe myself that way. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
very, very strong kind of structure to things, which I think is really, we didn't really have someone to replace him in that way, you know. But I think for a lot of people, that very strong structure they could kind of bounce off of, and and it's kind of a fountain of information on a certain kind of on metals and and certain kinds of materials, and a bit of an encyclopedia, you know, that you could go to him and he'd have an answer.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I should have taken advantage of it more. I don't know. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize for being such an asshole. Like, while I was in graduate school. I mean, I think back of that, Marilyn, and you had so much patience with me, and you were so good to me. And I was like a little, I don't know.
We had a few adversarial kind of.
I mean, I was just, you know, immature and hot-headed. Now I'm mature and hot-headed, but you were so kind to me, and I really appreciate it. And I never thanked you enough. And you were such a great teacher. You know, I really appreciate you now that I can say that, right? Going back, and
Thank you.
I think about you all the time. And my words that come out of my mouth are your words, you know? It's great. You're passing it on.
I remember we had this issue over a set of keys, and I had lost my keys, and no one seemed to know where they had gone. It was like a whole set. It was back when you didn't have, you had a separate key for every little thing.
Yeah.
So this giant wad of keys, and I had no idea where they had come from, and or where they had gone, and then they were like, you know, I would hear these little rumors, and then they kind of reappeared somewhere. And I'm sure I just left them laying on a table or something. And another faculty member pointed out to me that it was perfectly natural that that was an opportunity for someone to just, it wasn't evil or anything. It was just, there was this great opportunity that of course somebody's going to take advantage of.
Yeah. Did I take them? Getting it?
I don't really know. I think so. They may have been passed around.
I mean, that's really something I would have done, but I don't remember that. So
Selective memory. Hey, you guys, we need to let Amy Pryor get on. She's got other engagements, and I just want to thank you, Amy, for coming, and for your time. And I will let you get on with the rest of your life. Not beholden to the screen.
Really good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
We'll be in touch, Amy. Thank you. So Pocket, I feel like I should give you a formal introduction. I have been sort of the way that I kind of try and, work these live talks with Marilyn has been just to sort of give you the lay of the land. I can share my screen. I can go to your website. I can, because Marilyn hasn't seen work. So, it's good to sort of give her a little bit of history. And it puts you two on the screen together with a larger screen showing the work, and I can scroll through. I can hear you. I'm going to jump off of the screen after I read a little bit about you to introduce our audience. But you can say, hey, Courtney, can you do blah, 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 blah. and I can do that, and you can see what I'm showing on the screen. And
Okay.
so I'm gonna give a formal introduction, and I am jealous that you have a Wikipedia page. I wish somebody would do a Wikipedia page on me. You can't do it for yourself.
For you. Now I know. I'll do one for you.
So I'm reading from some of your Wikipedia here. Amy Toscani, born I shouldn't say when you were born. No, it's a Minnesota-based sculptor whose large-scale works are informed by an arts and crafts aesthetic evocative of childhood. Amy Toscani, what they're saying, in Dayton, Ohio. Received both of her Bachelor's of Fine Arts and Master's of Fine Arts from Ohio University. Toscani's whimsical sculptures have exhibited across the Twin Cities, including the University of Minnesota, in St. Paul's Western Sculpture Park, the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, Rosa Lux Gallery in Minneapolis, and Franconia Sculpture Park. Chad Rudder characterizes Toscani's work as uniquely Midwestern in its aesthetic, due in part to her choice of source materials, often being found in thrift shops and merged with reconstituted plastic and steel. Toscani received Jerome Foundation grants in 1999, 2005, and 2006, and a Bush Foundation grant in 2004, and a McKnight Artist Fellowship in 2013 and 14. So welcome to our last and final Talks with Marilyn. And last but not least, I'm so excited that you're here and we got you. And I'm just going to say one last thing before I jump off is the Sculpture Alumni Show at Siegfried Hall at the Ohio University Art Gallery will be open tomorrow, Saturday, from 12 to 4 p.m. And that is the last day of the show. So all of our people watching can make sure they make it out to that. And I'm going to let you and Marilyn chat for about a half hour or so. And I'll pop back in and sort of give my thanks. And let me know. I'm happy to share my screen and show some works. Do you have anything offhand that you want me to pull up and prepare?
If you see something that's not so good, don't pull it up.
Okay.
Okay. There's some are better than others,
Okay. All right. So I can hear y'all. I'm just going to mute myself and pop off. So.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm interested to see some work. I've seen a few images, but I think they were from a long time ago.
Yeah. Right. I know. I'd like to see your work too. Are we allowed to do that? Or you don't want to?
We don't have. Courtney has some images, and I think they've been part of some of the conversations. So I think if you look back through some of the other discussions, there have been a few things, and I think we're going to try to get some stuff on the OU website too.
Yeah.
I don't have. I'm not kind of running things here. I'm sort of just the talker. So.
Yeah, that's right. You're a messenger.
I can pull up some images of Marilyn's show too. What do you guys want to see? I have Amy. I have your stuff pulled up just as a Google search, and then you can maybe navigate through that just for Marilyn to get her eyes on it while I load some of the other stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Marilyn, you look exactly the same.
Yeah, that's because I have this light behind me.
You sort of look like you're in paradise or heaven. You've like
I'm in paradise here. It's just like this is the I don't know. It's like the best backdrop that is available to me where I am.
Yeah. Here we go.
It's interesting. I'm seeing that kind of patchwork thing. I remember that from I think your MFA work.
Yeah. I know seaming has really been important to me. I don't know why. I think it's because I've never, that's how I build. It's like I can't go beyond like one step at a time. So I break it down, I think. I break my materials down as I go. There they are. There's all the little friends. Yeah.
So there's some large scale things, and then there's also things that are much smaller. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know as I get older and my conditions change, right? Like studio changes, you could tell like when I was in a bigger shop, when I'm in a smaller shop,
Uh-huh.
And also what's public art and what isn't. Yeah. It's funny looking at my oeuvre over the screen. It's like, oh yeah, there's that one. Yeah. But I did, Marilyn, when I was in graduate school, I was working mostly with found steel.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think. I'd go to that. I tried to find when I was back in OU a couple weeks ago. I went to Nelsonville and I tried to find the old junkyard that I went in, and I couldn't. I couldn't find anything. I was like, I've never been here before. It was sort of like the Twilight Zone going back,
Yeah.
And but anyway, so I'd strip washers and dryers and water heaters of their colored steel, and then I'd sort of weld it back together in sort of a patchwork and they looked sort of like that one with the squirt, that green one hanging from the ceiling. They sort of look like machines in a way. That's sort of indicative of my old work that I did in graduate school.
They have a lot of animation, and I remember those having that as well. You can kind of imagine them in different positions, and they have a lot of movement. Are there images at the end of these funnel shapes?
Yeah. That was a public art piece that was in the University of Minnesota, and it was for their molecular and cellular biology building. And so that hangs in the entryway of the atrium of this building. And at the time, so in the center hive, it had like 5 projectors. And then I had to get special screens that, could take being projected while it was still light. So those were special 3M screens at the end of those. Yeah, so that was a squirrel eating a nut. But I was like, molecular structure, anything is molecular structure. I mean, like, I could put anything in there, I mean, dealing with cellular biology. So, I mean, that was interesting. I don't know. People either hated that sculpture or loved it, but it's still there. And it's, it's about 10 feet across by 5 feet high.
All the images of the squirrel, or?
No, they're different images. So it had 5 different projectors, so you could just load whatever. I needed help on that. On the technical side, I needed a lot of help, but yeah. So anyway, yeah, but that's what my graduate work looked like.
It didn't look like that, but it had that feel to it.
Yeah.
That edge of humor and seriousness.
Yeah. Some people said that piece looked like a big still, like a big moonshine still hanging from the ceiling. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess it does. Anyway.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I know. That's not a bad idea, is it? Yeah. So, and I do a lot of plastic welding. So that log with the colored line is plastic welding. And in the show, in the OU show currently is 2 plastic welded pieces. So, yeah. And, plastic is ubiquitous. So it's really nice and cheap to produce these things. So, that was basically a line drawing coming off of this log. And so, and those were just sort of like buckets that I cut up and cups. And then I sort of welded that network of color in like a line drawing.
You can't hardly beat the color of plastic. It's just, it's has depth, and it's not going anywhere. It doesn't shift.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
I know. Yeah, I know. I lucked out. But you, Marilyn, now you used to use color in your work, and do you still use color in your work, or?
I haven't been lately.
Yeah.
But I did have a period of time when was very involved in color.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still, once in a while, but not like I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know. But sometimes it comes in your system and goes out, and I don't know.
I know I'm into a lot of spare use of materials now, and the newer pieces are basically just graphite on canvas and
nice.
just like a number 2 pencil and a ruler. And the process is just really simple.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that about it. But yeah, I have used a lot of color of both. And I think I learned color from found material. Putting together found material, I never found that I learned very much from trying to mix paint or but more from a kind of collaging and using found color, although I did start using paint more. And I've always worked kind of around the fringes of a painting practice that doesn't exist at all. So and I got interested in the use of the wall because it was a place where I could install something and use the space and move things around. But and from the fabric pieces, if they're the ones I remember, were they like that fake fur, grizzly fur at that time? Because I used to use this black fur that was very much reminded me of charcoal drawing. Wow. And I'm kind of working out of that history with drawing. So these are all kind of the basis of what I do is that I measure out and, very much, I thought maybe this was just something I was going to work through, but I've been doing it a really long time. Yeah. There's a really long history with the use of the grid by artists going back to the 70s. And the work I was doing during that time period was almost visually, it almost looks in opposition to this, but it isn't entirely. But this is kind of that piece right there is made up of a lot of small panels and is kind of the last color that I use. This one is newer. And it's a big piece of canvas. It's about, I don't know, 6 by 7 maybe. And there's some white acrylic, almost like white out over the drawing.
Nice idea.
And I don't know if we have any close-ups of that, but are there any close-ups of that? They have this quality of being kind of a blur from a distance. And in this one, there's a big splosh of light. So it sort of dissolves the actual detail of it. But these are some older ones that you can kind of see that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Well, and I love how they they give, I'm always talking about sculpture or any type of visual art that reads from 20 feet away, and then there's this intimate micro giving that a piece does when you're on top of it. And I love that range of this work, right? That it reads, you could read it from across the gallery, but you also can get 6 inches from it and it's still giving. I think that's really nice.
I think of that. I mean, that's why in a lot of ways it's very much sculpture to me.
Yeah.
That it has a physicality to it, and it has, it's not like you walk around it, but you have to move through it and and see it from different views, near and far, to actually see it. And it's not completely comprehensible from a distance or from close up.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Comprehensible. Oh, I like that. I'm going to start using that, Marilyn. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love these how they're on the grid, but then they sort of break the grid. They're really, yeah, I mean, you could, this is a piece, or that big, large canvas piece, look like a piece that you could just sort of like sit and eat your lunch and still look at it, and it gives.
I thought you were going to say sit and eat your lunch and still work on it, which is a little bit,
Yeah,
a little bit of what I do. I mean,
that's probably true too.
So much done in parts. You can see it a little bit better.
Oh,
here.
yeah. There it is. Yeah. So was that tan? Is that tan canvas, and then you painted the white out? Did you?
It's just raw canvas.
Wow. And you drew that grid on it? Like, ay. That's detailed.
So it's a little bit of a battle between me and the canvas. The canvas is, it's measured and it's woven, but it doesn't, I'm kind of applying this evenly measured system to it that it doesn't really accept completely. There's always something that doesn't quite fit. So I started using these kind of blocking out of the white as a way to make corrections.
Oh, wow.
And, this one, to me is a much more logical kind of system than the one that had the color panels, because those wood panels are much more controllable. Canvas, it does all kinds of things. It stretches and it wrinkles and the graphite smudges, and something that is measured out in a very clear way on one end by the time I get to the middle, or the other end has changed. So I'm always kind of trying to shift that around. And I don't know, I find it to be a really interesting game. It's a very different thing if I'm like right now, the one I'm working on, I'm working from the corners. So
yeah, your approach
on the corners, it has nothing in the middle. And I might do it a different way where I fold it and I find the middle. Right. And then work out from that. But there's always something that has to be rectified back and forth.
Oh, that's great.
I like them being large because it doesn't allow me to easily draw a line all the way across the thing.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and then it's so much about materialism, and I think I read something. I read a book. David Humphrey, the painter, has this book called Blind Handshake. And I think in there he talks about sort of you have to collaborate with your materials. It's sort of like a give and take with the materials. And I like that. I like that, just working with some materials. And some materials would not let you work with them, right? Like they're just like, no. And some other ones give a little bit and there's a little more flexibility. And I love how you sort of have to navigate around just a piece of canvas that, the canvas has a will, and you are going to also abide by that and also try to, work with it. So I love that.
I think the use of the plastic is an interesting thing, particularly that's more rigid. Being able to adapt that into something seems, I don't know. I kind of admire that. Amy Pryor and I were talking about the use of plastic too, because it's almost like you're doing the service for the culture by using it and getting people to see it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
But it's almost like you could never do enough because it's just a constant thing, and it goes nowhere. It seems to just I know I have a little bit of woods here where I live, and I'll be walking in the woods and there'll be like this little piece of toy from the people that lived here like 40 years ago.
Yeah. And
it just is like present, and everything changes around it, but it's very much
it's up. I know working with the plastic, it's like it's so gross, but it's everywhere, right? And I only use plastic. So, I'll be in my truck and I'll see a bin, that's off the side of the road, and I'll pull over. But I only get it from like thrift stores that it's already created. So I don't buy new plastic. So that's important to me, that that I'm reusing that awful, evil material. And, I think it just came out a couple weeks ago. I read a headline about like, how much plastic there is, and we're not really recycling when they say we're recycling plastic, but it's a great material too, because it's fun to work with. I wear a respirator, obviously, or I wouldn't be here, but when I weld it, but that's something I didn't do in graduate school. But it's almost like melting crayons. It's really fun. It's fun to work with. I mean, it's really also fragile, but it stands up for a exhibit. That piece, the one you're showing on the screen now, is that's plasticine. Marilyn, I think you. Oh. Yeah, it's just that clay that has it's petroleum based, so it never dries out. So it's a traditional sculpting material. Mm-hmm. So I was collecting all those. On top, there's those little knickknacks, and I was collecting all these little knickknacks that said, love is, love is, a grandparent or something like that. And so I was just really struck by that language. So I wanted to make a big one. So then I was trying to find like this really cerebral art statement, like that was but it needed a lot of R's in it. So it made sense. So I sort of had this Elmer Fudd, speech impediment with the cerebral art speak. So that one says, love is reconstructing normative reality, which is so stupid. I know people either hated that one or loved it, but
it's interesting because it looks a little bit like it reminds you of a pot plant, like a big cat.
Yeah.
Or I'm probably getting in trouble here, but like a menorah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. That one was really fun. In fact, I'm going to do more of that. When I see my old work, I'm like, why don't I make another one of those? And that was really fun too, because I was thinking of sculpture and me being a sculptor in the continuum of, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of being tens of thousands of years of sculpture itself. And, and I was like, those people that produce those little figurines, like the world's best golfer or whatever, are probably better technicians in sculpture than I am, and I was thinking like, I was trying to, in this way, I was sort of paying an homage to those people who are sculptors but never get any recognition. And so then I was sort of like trying to make my own little, oversized knickknack. And so in the end, I mean, you could sort of see in the middle range there, I was trying to like sculpt a landscape or chisel away with this plasticine because it was so fun to work with. And, just where are we in the continuum of sculpture? So I'm always trying to be contemporary and irreverent, I guess, towards the discipline. And I think that was true in graduate school, that I didn't really take myself seriously as a sculptor or sculpture as a discipline seriously. And I think that's, I think you allowed me to do that, like make fun of it. Fun of it.
I think that's a great trait. And there's, I don't know, it's always great to see humor in art. I think it's like it's a way to draw in a viewer that you can't really beat, and this is an interesting concept that it's like you're making this bridge between these little objects that are consumed by so many people. And there's like this universal kind of knowledge of what all of those things mean.
Yeah.
It doesn't always bridge over into a kind of an understanding of contemporary art.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, try to connect those two, I think is a great thing.
Oh yeah. On a good day I could do it, but I don't know. So yeah, when I go to thrift stores a lot, and so I'm always fascinated. I love little figurines because I'm like, God, a lot of them are weirdly frozen in 19th century. Like you see a lot of female women, in these ball gowns. Like, it's like, why are we stuck in like 1847 or something? It's so weird. I find that weird. And it's like a weird gender thing, It's like these figurines are not based in reality, but everybody has them in their house.
Yeah.
And so I find them, I like to sort of like examine culture through like those gender studies that through objects, I guess. And so I find it really odd. So I like those little figurines because it's all right there, you know, like you could just, it's like low hanging fruit. I could sort of pick those apart.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I've always liked that piece, but people liked it or hated it, you know.
Yeah. It's like there's this kind of continuing fantasy with the beauty all dressed up in a fine gown going to a social event that
Yeah.
there's so much fantasy built around it. Never seems to go away.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and then, well, I was in this one antique store and I was looking at figurines and I saw this figurine and it was a man. And in fact, I still have it in my bathroom, but it's this man and he must have been holding a rifle or something, but he had this like little gesture and to me, he looked like stereotypical gay man, right? Like it was like, and he was really sort of effeminate and sort of non-binary. So I was like, oh my God, and then I started looking at these figurines with just like the guise of, you know, sexuality, right? Like what's their preference? And then I was like, I could find all these like Louis XIV figurines of men, but then I was trying to find lesbians, you know, and I couldn't do it because I was like, and then I found this one little figurine and she had a straw hat and she had like, you know, I mean, it looked like she was right out of Athens, Ohio, right? Like she had a straw hat and like a corn cob pipe. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that's a lesbian, you know, figurine. And so then I started collecting sort of like, you know, gay men, lesbian. I haven't done, well, I guess they're trans in there too. And I just thought it was interesting. So I'm going to do a piece on that, but I just don't know how to wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all right there, you know.
Yeah, like these portrayals of, or I guess the idea of costuming yourself.
Yeah.
And creating your gender.
Right.
Is an interesting thing. And I think there's always like interest in different gender portrayals by everyone. It's like, you know, you want to be able to have all of these different sorts of roles, but yeah, finding them in the popular culture, that's an interesting thing. It's like the hidden. Yeah,
they're out there. I think if we are looking for them, you know, and I collect album covers, and I have this Tchaikovsky album cover, and then I was going to do something with it, and I thought I should research him. You know, maybe it'll give me. And then it's all of a sudden I find out Tchaikovsky's queer, and I was like, I never knew Tchaikovsky was queer, but it's like, yeah, it's out there, but it's like it's all, you know, no one wants to. In fact, in this Wikipedia thing I saw, it's like, you know, I think he was Russian. The Russian government sort of covered that up, and you know, no one wants to speak of it. And so, you know, I just feel like we're out there, but you have to look for us, you know,
or you can show us.
Yeah. And you know, I feel like in a way, Marilyn, just saying, you know, normative in this piece here that we're looking at, you know, I was sort of looking at sort of like queer language, but also, you know, Elmer Fudd language and cerebral language. So, and it had an R in it. So, you know, I was trying to sort of like put all that together, and I feel like my work is, I mean, it's a lot about materialism, but it's also about being queer and being other, you know, like these pieces, my pieces are sort of misfits and they're others to me. Because I am, you know, it's like, at least I feel that way. And I guess as I get older, I feel more free to express that, you know, than when I was in the 80s, when in the 80s, you know, I couldn't really, I mean, I was out, but I wasn't really, oh, I love that piece. That one's called, Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life. based on that song. And that's just like a plastic basket, laundry basket with, I cut up a painting from a thrift store, like that bucolic, sublime landscape. And then I collaged that together as the base. I should do another one of those. I have a lot of those paintings. I have a lot of stuff.
How do you, well, I guess I want to say something about this idea of what our identity is. I'm trying to read, I just started this, but it's a Julia Kristeva essay called Strangers to Ourselves.
Okay.
And I think it's being read by some other people I know. I think because it was written in 91, but it's so kind of current. So it just talks about this idea of the stranger, either making someone else the stranger or seeing someone as a stranger, or also the idea of the stranger within oneself, and how that is sort of thought of and navigated. And I haven't gotten very far, but I'm finding it to be really interesting.
Oh, that sounds good.
I want to hear about this. Go back to the big one.
I love that one. I love that one. Oh,
yeah. So all of this wrinkling in the steel, that's the steel, right?
Yeah, that's steel, mild steel. Yeah. 22 gauge.
Oh, okay. So it's thin enough that you could just bend it, or did you find it that way?
Yeah, no, I made these cubes. I had to teach this class at Minneapolis College of Design. I mean, I didn't have to. I was privileged to. And so I was going to make a piece for their outside garden too, their outside sculpture garden in Minneapolis. And so I made this maquette of this. You could, Courtney, you could go to that. It's called Control Freak. It's a green piece. It has the words control, and there it is. It's all smashed. So I made this piece. It's called Control Freak. And so I made these steel letters, and then I had the forklift smash them. I had this 18-year-old kid on the forklift, and I was like, oh, he was smashing it. So it was sort of about being in control. It was for my partner, actually. She's a control freak, but it was about being in control and being out of control, because, sculpting something and then having it smashed, it's like you're out of control, right? Like, I have no control over these letters. And then I thought it was funny that it was like Control Freak, and then it looked like it was run over by a car or something. But then the base of that piece is like cock drawings. Oh, the base of that piece, Marilyn, it would melt your eyes. It's so beautiful. I mean, I should have just done a piece like that. But anyway, so it was almost like doing a mandala. It was so controlled. So it was sort of about being in control and out of control. And so I did that piece in that class. And then we had to make a big public art piece for the sculpture garden. So then I was like, I'm just going to smash it, right? I'll just do something. I love to smash it. Like, why don't I smash all my sculptures? Because I loved it so much. And so then I had to go to an auto body yard where they smash cars, and then this forklift would put these cubes in there and then sort of slightly smash them. I couldn't smash them a lot because the powder coating surface wouldn't get into all the grooves, so it just had to be slightly smashed. But anyway, I did a maquette for this big piece, and it was totally abstract, and people were like, it just looks like a piece of crap, right? So then I realized I had to have cubes, like something recognizable and then distressed, instead of just some crazy shape, because then it looked like it could be smashed. Anyway, so that piece was the precursor to that other big, large piece that I did.
So you made the big rectangular pieces.
Yeah, so I made these big cubes. I mean, really lightweight. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
The bending in that is really, it's draws you in.
Yeah.
Because it has this, the idea of an event is involved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. I know. I just read this article. Where was it? It was online, and it was about John Chamberlain. Urs Fischer and another sculptor. Who else was it? And it was talking about like the impact, right, and the time element, and yeah, it was really fun to make, and it was great working with this forklift driver, you know, because he was like, I tipped him $20. I mean, the whole thing cost, it was so cheap to make because they let me do it. I was, you know, I had to go to the head of the junkyard, auto junkyard, and he was like, okay, you could do it for $40. And I was like, okay, I'll do it for $40. And then anyway, so I have a video of it, you know, and they smash it with the hydraulics, and but yeah, it was about sort of like the ideal of perfection, and then yeah, just having it smashed and distressed, sort of like Control Freak in a way. You know, you think it's going to be this beautiful, you know, lettering, and I love working with text. I think it's hard to do, but you know, you think it's going to be perfect, and then when it's like smashed with a forklift, it's like you feel it. You know, you feel it in your body, I think.
Yeah, I think also the word control is still more intact, where the freak part is like
Yeah,
much more effective. And it's always that idea of control, where the more you try to have control, the more mistakes you make, and the more things are going to spin out because I'm like holding on so hard.
Right. Oh, Marilyn, you've got a good eye, because we first started doing that. The F in the freak was the first one the kid smashed on the forklift, and I was like, oh no, you can't even read it. That's gonna be awful. Actually, that's my favorite letter, because I was like, just ease off on that, you know, because it was like, I was like, okay, now just slowly let the forklifts go, and he'd be like anyway, I gotta plug my computer in. It's about to die. Hold on just a sec.
Sure. It's interesting you don't think of managing a forklift driver as a sculpture technique, but
yeah, I know. I'm sure he was just like, what do I have to do? But yeah, that piece, this is one of my favorite pieces. This is in my backyard. But yeah, that's what it was like, in control and out of control. And I'm telling you, Marilyn, that base with all the caulk lines, I mean, I should have a detail of that shot, but it took me like 2 weeks to make that base. And the base is only, you know, 2 feet tall by 3 feet wide or something. But it was just like laying those lines on was really like, I felt like it was a dedication or a devotion piece, you know, like every inch is labored over. And I also felt like that base read as a landscape. It was almost like a Hollywood sign. That's where I got the idea. I know.
Yeah, like 2 mountains.
Yeah. And so in a way it was like, there it is. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful, Marilyn. If you saw that, I'm telling you,
I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like fabric, right? Like,
yeah, but it drapes. And I think caulk is kind of, I don't know, you can draw all kinds of things with caulk. It's great material. Yeah.
I did a few caulk drawings. They're not very good, but that's why they're not on my website. But I know, I love caulk. In fact, I was just talking to a graduate student. He's using caulk now. And I'm like, you know, you could draw with that, you know. Yeah. And I mean, in a way, he is sort of drawing with it, but he's just using it as a tool, you know, a material that is a tool. But really, I mean, I think, you know, when you go to Home Depot and all the big box stores, I mean, like all those materials are just waiting to be used, you know, but we just have to figure out how to use them, I think.
I've gone shopping for materials at those places a lot, which is just, it's like a sculpture material store.
Yeah.
Because you go to an art supply store and there's nothing there.
I'm like, let's do the paint. That's why we're sculptors. I know. You know, Marilyn, I was telling this story about Dave Klein, and just yesterday or 2 days ago, something. And I was in the College of Fine Arts, and because I was going to be a music teacher, and I was like, no, I better take, I was going to go into radio television because it was OU, right? And so this is before I met you. And so I took all these like basic FCC courses. I took all these, you know, foundation courses. And so I went to the College of Fine Art to change my major to telecommunications. And Dave Klon was my counselor. And he goes, oh, you won't graduate with, he goes, you've got a long way to go. I said, well, I know I won't graduate in 4 years, but I was thinking I was going to be the 5-year plan. He goes, no, look at all these art classes you took. And I took like 2 or 3 drawing, like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he goes, well, he goes, you could be an art major. And I said, I can't be an art. I'm not good enough to be an artist. And he goes, you don't have to be good. He goes, take studio arts. Like and so my undergrad was in drawing, illustration, and sculpture. But then I was just telling someone, I said, once I found sculpture, it was like before, when I was in 2D, I was like, I don't know, I could do that. I could do expressionism. I could try to do realism. I could, try to do all this stuff. But when I found sculpture, it was like I had a voice, like I found my voice.
Yeah,
and I sort of feel that way.
It's my first sculpture class. I was at Washington University in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
Basically, the only sculpture they had there was, I don't remember the man's name now, but he did clay modeling, but modeling from the body. And he taught this, like, it was a little elective class. I think, I don't even know if it was the first one that I wanted, but he had us do things like go to the zoo and draw and make animals. And he took us around to gardens in St. Louis.
Wow.
He showed us like little fountains he had made and things. Yeah. And I just knew immediately that wasn't really sculpture, but I just loved making that stuff.
Really?
Just the armature and putting the clay on. And I thought, I'm going to have to transfer to a school that has sculpture. And fortunately for me, they changed administration. They hired a sculptor and he came in and changed things entirely.
Wow.
His name was Jim Starrett. And anybody that worked around that area at the time kind of knows of him. But he had this very open idea of material, and he had been at Tyler School of Art, and he was taught in Kansas. And he just had this, like, just go ahead with it attitude.
Yeah.
Kind of the 70s all over. But it's just interesting how it's like a magnet, once you kind of connect with something that even if you don't know anything about it, you know that's where you are. That's your language. I know it's a very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So it sort of clicked for you too. Like something made, like it was, and maybe it's just enjoyment, like I tell my students all the time, I'm like, have fun. If you don't have fun, I said, it's like smiling over the telephone. Like you could tell when someone's smiling over the telephone. I'm like, this comes out, and I feel like joy is part of art making, at least for me. I mean, I'm sure for other people it's more political than that, but I just feel like if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. And I've always felt like with the idea of sculpture is that it's your choice.
Yeah.
And if I start calling something by a different name, then it has like rules to it or something. But sculpture,
that is true. That's true.
And I think it's just true. I think it's the way the field is. It's like it can be what you decide.
Yeah. Yeah. There's freedom.
Yeah.
And you want to put a little video in there? Put a little video.
Yeah. This one's interesting. It looks like it's cardboard. Is it?
No, the base is, the bottom part is TV trays that I've riveted together. Oh, and then the top part is a ceramic piece I found in the back of where I teach. Someone like threw it away and I was like, what is that? So anyway, I took that ceramic piece, found ceramic piece, and then I put a base to it. And it was so funny, Marilyn, because I was like, okay, I like to have a tripod, right? 3 legs, and it didn't stand up. So I was like, okay, I'll put a 4th leg on it. And then I put a 4th leg on it and still didn't stand up. And I was like, oh my God, I have to put a 5th leg on this thing to make it stand up. So then I was like, I'm going to start putting 5 legs on all my sculpture. Like I loved how that,
Yeah.
And it really was just so it would stand up. So
You have to have an odd number.
yeah, I know. 2? No.
So did anyone recognize the part that you kind of claimed as yours that they had thrown away?
Yeah, a couple people knew, and they knew the student's name too. So they were like, "Oh, that's Joe Smith's sculpture," and I was like, "Oh, really?" I mean, I didn't really. I think he was a graduate student here before I started teaching here, and I mean, there's more parts out there. I was like, "Oh my God, this is like a gold mine."
Yeah, there's a kind of tradition in ceramics to throw away things, and
Yeah.
tradition in sculpture to go get them.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'm like in the background just howling. You guys are awesome. It's a tradition in ceramics to throw things away and sculpture to go get
It's Rocket. She's the one that's we didn't get to go through all the work, but
Yeah,
your website.
exactly. Yeah, that's right. Like, look at all that work that someone put into that. Yeesh. Oh, there's some album cover faces. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, from the 60s and 70s and probably more.
there's a lot of those albums. You could tell who's popular in the thrift store, like there's Edie Gourmet is that big head in the middle, Harry Belafonte, Chuck Mangione. There's Edie Gourmet. And there's Burl Ives. I like him a lot. Andy Williams. I don't know who those other people are. Harry Belafonte's that head on the bottom.
Oh yeah, I can just see the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then did you attach it to something?
Yeah, so I just had foam, that pink foam, and then I'd scribe out the form, and then there's just a metal armature running through all those heads. And so on the other side, there's completely different heads. So just from album covers. So it was a great, I wanted it to be tree-like, but not read like a tree. And then the bottom is aquarium rock that I got from a pet store. Just black and white aquarium rock that you just put adhesive on, and then that Friendly Fridley. My partner is from Fridley is a suburb of Minneapolis, and she's from Fridley, and I just think it's so ironic that their little saying for the suburb is Friendly Fridley, and I'm like, God, they hate me in Fridley. Like, her family hates me, right? So I'm like, it's so ironic that it's called Friendly Fridley. I've never seen anyone smile in Fridley. So I felt like in a way they were all sort of smiling. So then I put Friendly Fridley in there, like sort of like with the letter jacket font, And it was almost like this big top that came up to that the morphology of the head. So the structure of the head. So yeah, I mean, I really like that. I love that piece too, and I'm doing more sand sculpture like that now. But
it's like you could add onto it through the years.
I have hundreds, and it's funny because I'll be in the thrift stores looking at albums, and then there's some nerd looking for albums too, and I'm like, I bet we're looking for different things, because. The nerd is usually looking for music, and I'm like, oh, you can have my album. I don't want my album. I just want the cover.
Just the covers.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a little plastic welted piece. Oh, then sometimes I use well, I haven't for a while, but sometimes I use that parade float material. Yeah, I just loved parade float material because it was like pageantry, but it was also banal.
And it has fringe on the bottom?
I'm sorry?
Fringe on the bottom?
Yeah, so that's all parade. There's a website you could go and you could get parade float material, and it comes in these giant rolls, instead of. So, anyways, yeah. So I tried to make, it was always like, do I make a parade float? Do I not make a parade float? So, I never knew quite how to handle that material. But yeah, there's the top of that love piece. So that says happy anniversary. So then when I was thinking about the, continuum of sculpture, I was like, well, I'm going to make my own sort of googly-eyed form. So I would put googly eyes in the top of the head, or in the top of the arm,
like it's watching us.
Yeah. Marilyn, you're so awesome. You're so good. You have such a good eye.
I just like looking.
Yeah. That's a carpet piece, and then I love fake materials. So this fake paneling. So it's just vinyl. And then I painted like paint by number scenes on them.
Hmm.
Oh, that was another piece. That one, I was lucky it stood up. Oh, there's the log drawing. Oh yeah, squirrel. Yeah, there's more plastic. Yeah. Oh, there's some queer. That's what I was talking about. Oh, and Anita Bryant, her album. She's a nut. She's still alive.
Was she like speaking out against all kinds of diversity at one point and
hated gay people? And she's awful. If you Google her, Anita Bryant, she's like Amy Coney Barrett. She's some wingnut, and then she's known for like a gay man pushed a pie in her face at one of her interviews. Anyway, so I find her albums all the time.
yeah.
And so I'd sort of like to juxtapose Anita Bryant with Liberace, because I have a lot of his albums too. But anyway, see that little figurine holding up the Anita Bryant. Yeah. So see that little. So that was my lesbian knickknack, that one of them that I found. I was like, oh yeah,
The independent woman.
Yes. And then I love that wagon wheel, because it talks about pioneer, like earnest hard work,
Yeah.
But then on Anita Bryant's, one of the titles of the song is Our Day Will Come. So I sort of wanted to
That's right. Wow, I remember that song.
Yeah, Our Day Will Come,
Yeah.
So it's sort of like a threat too, because our day is coming,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
here. So she's old world bigotry.
Is that gravel on there as well?
Yeah, I think that was aquarium rock
Uh,
too I was using. Yeah. So I was trying to do this little tableau, and put these figurines, and then I try to make it specific. So I would cut the arm off and sort of have it grab the album cover. So yeah, I don't know. It was more of a populism little sculpture I was making. Yeah.
It reminds me of just the tradition of yard figurines.
Yeah.
And the way that people keep things that refer to the past. That way, you're going too fast. What? So this are those little ceramic rabbits?
Yeah, I got that at this woman. I didn't know her, but she died of cancer, and she made ceramics. And so in her basement, there's all these rabbits. And I thought it was funny because, they've multiplied, right? There's like hundreds of rabbits in her basement. So I thought that was a funny little thing, that. And then I just thought I started doing, the way I started morphing more figurines was with little knickknacks, because I wanted them to be a base for a sculpture, but they were only six inches tall, so I wanted them to be like 12 inches tall. So I started using figurines as bases for sculptures. So I drilled holes in the rabbit's ears, and then I had these steel rods coming out. And then I have, of course, I have plastic curlers for a sculpture. And so I was like, it just seemed like this sort of Easter basket type, sculpture. No one likes that one though. I never got any grants with that one, Marilyn. But I find it a, interesting line drawing.
It's like the rabbits are thinking about having hair curlers and creating this kind of different sort of DNA.
Right. I never thought of it that way. Yeah. Yeah. So then these are just more sort of line drawings. I dug up those roots in my front yard, these bushes that had died. And I was like, oh my God, these are beautiful. So then I just sort of wanted to extend that structure. Oh yeah, I love cave stalagmites and stalactites. So those are a bunch of cave postcards.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's another knickknack. I have a friend, Marilyn, who she can't even look at this sculpture. She's like, oh my God, I can't even look at that one. It's so bad.
What did you do? You extended her legs?
Yeah, that's the blue boy, so it was gender bending, right? So that's a boy. And you look at it and it's like, oh my God, that's so, he's so effeminate. So then I sort of just elongate I started morphing, and I didn't know this, Marilyn, until about 5 years ago, but this word for sculpture, in the beginning, they didn't have the word sculpture. So they use plastic arts. And so then you look at plastic arts, and plastic just means, elastic or morphic, flexible. Yeah. So then when I found that out, I started like stretching these these figurines. And I mean, I don't know, this one I sort of like it because it's so ridiculous, but it's also, if you go on, Courtney, there should be a shot of the whole thing. Oh, maybe I didn't have it in order, but anyway, it's got this trunk behind. I tried to just make the figurine just bigger.
Yeah, I thought I saw it earlier from a distance.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't this look like a good group show, Marilyn? I mean, I know I don't stick to one thing. There it is. Yeah. So I just tried to sort of,
yeah.
Isn't that ridiculous? I know my friend, it's funny now that I look at that after she said, I can't even look at that thing. But I sort of like it. So I had to the scale change had to happen within the legs and that blanket. It's just a weird one.
It's very disturbing. It's like a nightmare. Yeah. Like you have that nightmare where your body is changing uncontrollably and you can't.
Your teeth fall out.
I don't know. I remember it. Maybe it's leftover from that werewolf movie where the guy starts growing.
Yeah. I know. So then I just sculpted, just out of foam and spackle. I would just sort of like take what the figurine looked like below. I mean, I did this Courtney, can you show the one I did with the dog who has the little head? And then I don't know where it is. There's a dog with a head. There it is.
Oh yeah. That one's really strange too.
Yeah. So this is how I started, Marilyn. So I had a figurine. I don't know if it's on this website, but I had a sculpture and I had little figurines. And then I had this like plastic network coming out of the heads of the figurines. And so I told my friend, and then I thought they weren't big enough. So I made them like, instead of, 8 inches tall, I made them like 18 inches tall. And then I asked my friend, I said, what do you think about those figurines that I did? She goes, what are you talking about? I didn't even know you manipulated them. And I was like, I spent like 2 days making that dog go from, 8 inches to 14 inches and you didn't even tell. So then I thought my work was too subtle. So that's when I started working on that dog sculpture that it was just a little figurine and then I just blew it up. I just thought it was, I thought I'd make it more obvious that I was morphing these objects.
Yeah. It's like all the work has this social side to it, but the ones where you can identify the figures or objects make it more explicit. Right.
Yeah. So there's another little girl with her dog, but that was, so I don't know. There she is. And then I just morphed the doll. And actually that plasticine piece that said Love Is, I was like, I'm doing this formulaic work, like little head, big body. Get it? So then I started, what else can I do? So yeah, when I find I'm in a rut, I sort of try to go the other way. There's Chad Rudder. Yeah.
Oh, he's the smasher.
Yeah.
Some of them remind me of Charles Ray's work a little bit.
Oh, that's a compliment.
Yeah, because he has this way of shifting and just making work that looks a little different, but there's always this thread that kind of ties things. And that I'm thinking about the boy, for example, that really tall, where he made this kind of mannequin boy that ordinarily would be, 4 or 5 feet tall, and it's just huge.
Right. Yeah, I know. I really like his work, and I also like, the Chapman brothers, Dino. Yeah, like they're Morphe. Oh, they're the same. Yeah, I know. I love those sculptors. They're really smart. Oh, there's the first piece, Marilyn. So up in that corner with the plastic network of straws. So I made those. Yeah, so I made those figurines like 3 feet tall instead of 8 inches, and no one could tell the difference. So I that's when I was like, oh, I'm gonna make this obvious. So that was the first piece I did with the knickknacks. But yeah, and there's Harry Belafonte. But yeah, Marilyn, you're there, right? Every step of the way when I'm making art.
That's nice to hear. I'll think of you making sculpture when I'm like drawing on my little things.
Yeah. Or just know that I'm so sorry that I was a jerk. And I'm probably still a little bit of a jerk now, but you gave me so much, Marilyn, and I thank you so much. You're such a great teacher.
Well, you had a great source of energy, a lot of energy going on, and made some great things. So I'm so glad to see you're still going and making really interesting work.
I love it. And the other thing is, I remember I was telling Courtney this story that I made this big like boat thing. I don't know if you remember. Anyway, in graduate school, and it was found metal. And I had a critique with you and Dave, and you came into the foundry, and you were like, huh, interesting. And you just pulled it was between 2 pillars, and it was this boat hanging down. And I was like, I made this great thing. And you went in and you pulled the hull of the boat out, and you transformed that sculpture in about 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, I remember taking a breath like, oh my God, you made it so much better. And you did that you just saw it and you came over and you pulled it, and it made it dimensional. Oh my gosh, you were amazing. You have such a good eye. You have such a good eye. I still remember that. It's humble. Yeah.
There's in teaching, you can see things because you're not the maker.
Yeah.
So you can see things that people that are actually involved in making it don't notice.
Yeah. Well, you're being humble, but I think, I don't know. You had like this magic. I don't know. Everything you said was golden. It still is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're a good teacher.
I'm so glad you're the last one of these, and you providing this great conclusion.
I love that. I'm going to use that quote. Everything you said was golden.
It's true. Yeah. It's like little kernels. I'm like, what did you say? I don't want to talk over you because what you're saying is better than what I'm thinking.
What a delight. This was so amazing. I'm so glad that we got you, even though, our timing was off and all that stuff. But I'm really, like Marilyn said, it was a wonderful way to sort of wrap up these talks. And it was fun to go through your work and hear. Like I said, I was muted, but I was howling. This is so much stuff. The fifth leg. Leg.
They barely stood up too after 5 legs. I was like, Jeezy.
It's also interesting this morning because Amy Pryor is so contemplative, and there's just a different tone to her work than yours. And one of the things I've always felt was really important about our sculpture program at OU is that we've had just all kinds of different things, and made a real effort to try to encourage differences.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also 2 things I want to say about that. And one came up, I think, when Amy was talking. But the one thing which we discussed, Marilyn, in a phone call when I was organizing the show was sort of the idea of sculpture, the name change from sculpture to sculpture and expanded practice. And the idea behind that being what you just said, being that it was encompassing so many different practices and so many different avenues of sort of inquiry that were happening from both the faculty and the students, that it felt that that name change was appropriate for that time moving forward. And I think that it still is. The second thing I wanted to say was that you know, the fact that Pocket and Amy both mentioned other sculptor professors and how different and diverse the experience was with both, not one or the other, and how important that I want to make it known that it is so important to have that breadth and diversity in perspectives from faculty, that whenever we start losing people and cutting positions and all that stuff, that it's really a disservice, whenever you have a singular voice.
Yes.
Even though everything you say, Marilyn, is golden, and I will stand by that. I agree. But it's also good to have the perspective of that other voice in the room,
Right.
that you hear in the back of your head, that you're like, I think I'm going to take part of that, and I'm going to take part of this, and I'm going to mash it all up together, and then call it mine, or whatever. And yeah, it's, with shrinking budgets across the nation and all of that stuff, I mean, it's a constant kind of thing that I'm always thinking about, and I'm sure you all are too.
Yeah, I know. And it shows it's, your art practice is democratic. I mean, you're the authority, but especially when you're in graduate school, you have all these like disparate voices, and it's interesting to be in a critique and people are disagreeing, and it's like, see, no one has the answer, and that's why you need different voices. And really, your voice is the only one that really matters. But
but you get the other perspectives.
Yeah, and I always have Dave sitting on one shoulder and Marilyn sitting on the other shoulder, and they're like, "Do this, don't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you." I think it's great. It's great.
Yeah. It's well, I hope I'm not haunting you.
No, in fact, I can't believe you even. I was thinking you'd put me out of your mind. Like, do not call Pocket. Whatever you do, don't get her in the show. But
well, it was
like,
the organic way this show came together, because it was during COVID, and I was just thinking, we're not going to be able to do any of this.
Yeah.
And the situation I was in, I didn't have my computer. I didn't have any old files or pictures or anything. So these names kind of came to me, and I just sent them to Courtney, and I said, listen, I don't know why these names came to me, but this is what we have. And it's just been really interesting to see how that all came together.
Yeah.
And
my name probably came to you because you wanted your keys back.
Yeah. Okay. Where are those keys? I don't worry about keys anymore.
Right. No,
but I do
awesome.
try to have some control over things.
Yeah. But I mean, what lucky students we are to have you, conjure up our names.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, there were many, but somehow, this is what happened, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for COVID. Just kidding.
COVID, I know. Ugh. That's why I'm in my office.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here. Get out of here. But I am so grateful. I am. You're the best.
Yes.
Well, thank you for participating in this. I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
It's been really good.
Well, I have one more story. Can I say one minute story? So I went to Maryland. I was looking in the slide library. That's how long ago this was, right? And I found this artist. Maybe you were making me write a paper on him or something like that. And I thought it was a her. I go, who is Maria DeWalter? And you're like, who? What artist? I said, Maria DeWalter. And then you looked at the slide and it said Walter DeMira. And you were like, you laughed. Oh my God, I got you to laugh. I remember seeing you. Oh my God, you just like, and I was like, I was like, what? I feel like an idiot. But anyway,
That's awesome.
I remember that time with you too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How much fun. And I mean, there's no way that, Marilyn, you could possibly remember all of these little incidents. And
No, I have no memory of that, but
Yeah.
I feel like me to, yeah.
It's the same as Pocket, totally removing the keys from her memory.
I know. I should look around. They're probably in my office somewhere.
It wasn't me. I didn't do it.
I mean, I was a shitty person, but I don't think I was that. I don't think I'd steal
No,
it.
no, they weren't stolen. I think it was just that I left them somewhere.
But
And
it sounds like someone was like, ooh, I've got the master key to like anything I want to. I don't know.
Your building.
Yeah.
I will tell you that when I graduated, I kept the master key for the sculpture building.
Ooh.
But then I got hired again, and I'm like, I'm not giving this back. I'm keeping this key. I still have it.
Yeah. You need it sometimes. And
I just used it. Yeah, totally. I just was in the sculpture building. It was great. I was cutting metal and grinding metal. It was awesome.
well, and your motivation is totally above board. It's just I need to get access. I
Yeah.
mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to sign into this like shared calendar to make sure that like COVID tracing and all that stuff, and you have to disinfect everything you touch and all that. But
Yeah.
I got some stuff done because I had that key.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna end us for today, and maybe we can do this with a glass of wine sometime, or hang out and
Yeah.
chat a little bit longer. But
When I went back to Ohio, I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. I miss it. I miss
Oh.
Ohio. I miss Athens so much. And it's changed.
well, when you coming back to pick up your sculptures?
You probably want it out of there. You're like, come and get it.
No, but when and if we could figure it all out. But yeah, I mean, it's a gorgeous drive right now. We just drove an hour to soccer game last night, and the trees are beautiful. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. I couldn't. I was like, this is like paradise in here. I mean, just the rolling hills, and I mean, you're in Appalachia practically, and
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yeah, it does have that.
Yeah, we're kind of flat here in Minnesota.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I need to come visit that town too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, when this all calms down a little.
Yeah, soon, I hope.
I know. All right. Well, I'm going to let you all get on with your days and enjoy the rest of this fall Friday, and have a great weekend, everyone. And please be in touch with all of us. Maybe what I'll do is organize kind of a group discussion that we can talk with all the alumni together. I don't know if it'll be public or if we'll just do it privately, but
Yeah, I
that would
love
be
it.
fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
My pleasure. I'm glad it all worked out.
Okay. Goodbye.
Marilyn.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I miss you.